Hello, Colts Nation. I tried to stay away. I tried to stay away from Anthony Richardson for just a little bit, but I cannot help myself. And here is the funny thing about Anthony Richardson that I'm starting to come to realize, right? The lead up to this draft that we really just had not that long ago was just led with all of these questions about Anthony Richardson's ability to transition to the league, the accuracy or the lack thereof, right? I mean, we were all guilty. And when I say we all, I mean myself. I was guilty, right? We know how it went. But since then, all the talk has shifted from that to talk about his character, his work ethic, his ability to absorb information, that big old arm of his, right? I mean, this is a complete 180-degree shift the second he was drafted. Now, to say that there wasn't people that were high on Anthony Richardson, that would be a little bit disingenuous. I know that much of Colts Nation wanted us to take him, but it really went from somewhat of a 50-50 split to him quickly becoming one of the favorites to win Offensive Rookie of the Year this season. By the way, last time I checked, side note, plus 600 for Anthony Richardson to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. I mean, for those of you that gamble, that seems like quite a value, right? You usually need to hit a 4-5 leg parlay for that type of thing to come into fruition. But I digress, neither here nor there. This is probably where I put the disclaimer. Don't take financial advice from me. I'm an idiot, right? So, point being, with all of those positives, right? The intelligence, the work ethic, the world-class athleticism, that monster arm. If it so happens that we look back in 5-10 years' time and we say Anthony Richardson and we look at him and we say he ended up being the best rookie in the entire 2023 NFL draft class, not for anything, we'll have felt like it was kind of obvious with all the information we had in front of us, right? So I'm kind of starting to kind of get in that energy, you know, kind of from this nervous energy around Richardson to like all in, like, yeah, I believe in him. Now, of course, I know he has to play and we'll see it out, but it is really starting to look more and more positive as time goes on. And with OTAs in full swing, one major topic of discussion in Colts Nation has just been the absolute lack of film available on what the heck is going on with this team. We are thirsty for this footage, right? I mean, we literally see one highlight of Richardson rolling out, two hands on the ball, right? Coaches are throwing, I don't even like batons. They're trying to, like, you know, ball protection type deal. He's on the run. He just flicks the ball into the net, and we are all just drooling over it. And you know what? We should be. That's our guy. And then you take all of the things I've mentioned, and you also look at Shane Steichen during his immediate availability times. Whenever he's asked about Anthony Richardson, you could just see him holding back a smile. And it kind of has me thinking that the Colts may, I don't know this for sure. I have no inside sources. I have the information that you have available to you, but they may just be keeping a little bit of a secret here with Anthony Richardson. That secret being that he's just a little bit better than we have all been led on to believe at this point. Now, that's all fine and well, but with the situation that we're in the AFC South, where this division now has 3 of the top 4 rookie quarterbacks from this draft, at least as per the consensus, other than Bryce Young in Carolina, we have our guy, Anthony Richardson. We're also looking at C.J. Stroud, who was drafted at number 2 to Houston, and Will Levis, who made that catastrophic slip all the way from what many people thought was going to be the 4th pick in Indy. He made it up to the top of the 2nd round, ended up in Tennessee anyway. So I figured, given that this type of thing, with all these young rookie quarterbacks, big-time rookie quarterbacks in one division, such a rare phenomenon, I figured it would be a cool thing to talk about, you know, kind of which of these guys in the AFC South is the best position or in the best position to succeed early on. And that means this year, of course, the rookie seasons, but perhaps even the next few as well. Now, in hopes of not creating any bad juju here for the Indianapolis Colts, I'm going to keep Trevor Lawrence's name out of my mouth. Number one, because he's not a rookie, but I'm just talking about AFC South as a whole. I'm going to leave him out of the discussion for now, as we assume that he is somewhat kind of in a class of his own when you look at the quarterbacks in this division as they currently stand. But consider this video another one of me trying to convince you that our Indianapolis Colts do have a reasonable chance at competing for a wild card berth this season. Now let's dive into it. But before we do, if you've been here before, My name is Justin. This is the Ride the Bench Colts cast. I'm introducing myself to the people who haven't. I do assume everyone's listening for the first time at this juncture in the, in the process, in the game. One thing I ask of everyone, other than enjoying the video, is if you're enjoying the video, just shoot it a like. I'd be, greatly appreciative of that. It takes 2 seconds. One, it's going to let you know or let YouTube know what to put in front of you. It's going to help me get out to as many people as possible. It's kind of like this beautiful ecosystem of things happening. If you could subscribe too, I'd be grateful. Again, a lot of grace out of me right now, right? I don't want to kind of sound like I'm just trying to toot your horn here. But for real, I'm going to be talking about the Colts a very long time. If you want to be a part of that journey, you can subscribe. You'll be getting a bunch of videos like the one today. And now that I've gotten that out of the way, we'll get right into it. So where exactly should I start? Now, I know this is a Colts show, so I want to make sure that the balance between talking about our team, our guys, our quarterback, versus the Titans and the Texans is kind of on point, right? I don't want to lose you by not talking about the Colts, but that's exactly what I'm about to do. So just so you know, everything is timestamped on this video, as is all my videos. So if you want to skip to, later in the show when I'm talking more about Anthony Richardson again, you could go ahead and do that, but I encourage you to stick around. I made a whole episode for a reason, right? So let's start with the Texans. Let's start with CJ Stroud. Whew, taking a breath. I feel like I'm talking a little fast. Maybe I should try to slow down, right? So now CJ Stroud was someone that I was very high on coming into this draft. Now that was, of course, until he got drafted by the Houston Texans, right? Once he was drafted there, I realized the error of my ways. I mean, I was wrong. CJ Stroud is a bust. We can write it down in permanent marker. And why is that? Because the Texans stink, all right? They can have, the Texans, a top 3 pick for the next decade, if you ask me. I would have absolutely no respect, no fear of, no confidence in this organization to do anything that they could sustain for more than 2-3 years at a time. So now, jokes aside, Texans hate aside, not that that is a joke, I'm dead serious about that, of course. You look at the infrastructure that the Texans have in place for CJ Stroud. Aside from the upper management, which we already know is a complete clown show, we've seen that play out, they have a group of receivers that actually make the Colts unit, which some people have questions about, look like one of the elite units in football. Now, they brought on Robert Woods, who, while very solid for many years, I like Robert Woods, seems to have lost a step in his game due to both injuries and age, or one or the other, whichever one takes precedence. He's not what he was like 4 years ago, right? We could all agree on that. Other than him, they have Nico Collins, who was like all right last year, and they brought on Dalton Schultz, who I think is a very solid tight end. What else? They drafted Tank Dell, who nobody had heard of before he ran like a 4.2 40, right? So we don't really know exactly what he's going to turn into. And was he from Nebraska, Indiana, Houston? And one of these schools that wear the red and white jerseys, right? I'm no college connoisseur when it comes to this type of thing. I kind of watch the film after the fact. I'm not every Saturday. I don't have the time, right? It's Sundays already. I'm already watching football. But I digress, right? Are those guys actually enough for CJ Stroud? You also have to consider that, like us, they have that rookie, that first-year head coach in DeMeco Ryans. Now, the difference here, of course, is that DeMeco Ryans is not an offensive-minded guy like our dude, right? Or at least we assume that's not where his specialties lie. I mean, obviously, he was the defensive coordinator for San Francisco, an elite 49ers defense last year, so I don't want to disrespect that. And then, of course, DeMeco was a hell of a linebacker himself in his playing days, which really weren't that long ago, when he played for the Texans for quite a bit of time as well. So special opportunity for him. All the respect in the world for DeMeco Ryans. Of course, I'm rooting against them, but if there's one thing that the Texans have done that I view as a positive, it's get this guy DeMeco Ryans, right? So this is certainly promising in some fronts, but for a guy like Stroud, who's coming from Ohio State, who has now been churning out absolutely elite wide receiver talent for quite some time, right? I mean, he was throwing the dudes like Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's just to name a few. There's other guys. To go from that to what the Texans have now provided him in a weak receiving core, a rookie head coach that's defensive-minded, in my opinion, that doesn't bode very well for CJ Stroud, at least early on. What he has right now is that elite arm talent of his, and maybe the potential for a surprise out of Houston's defense. But other than that, CJ Stroud, we look at, not really in a great position to succeed early on, right? So that's one quarterback off the list that we could look at and say, I'm not too scared of this situation here. So now we can move on to the Titans and Will Levis before we get back into the Colts, of course. So, man, have things changed quickly for Tennessee or what, right? They quickly went from the no-brainer best team in the AFC South with a bright future, may I add. This wasn't like they were winning now, but it wasn't viewed as they were at their peak. It went from that to maybe the only team that looks to be getting worse in this division. And now Tannehill projects to be the starter early, or at least many of us would assume. And when you have Derrick Henry there, who, in my opinion, with that workload at his size, is on borrowed time as an elite NFL running back, or at least one that you could rely on week after week after week after week. Without that factor there, what exactly is the Titans' identity, not just as an offense, but as a team? Now, of course, we're talking about the offense, right? You're going to have to figure that out for this young rookie quarterback. And who's the best weapon they have to throw to? Treylon Burks? I like Treylon Burks a lot, actually. Like, I really like Treylon Burks. But obviously, he wasn't on the field much last year between a lack of reps and then injuries. He's not exactly just going to go from what he was to a bona fide stud number one, at least reasonably. Of course, guys break out all the time, but I'm just talking about the information that we have available for us, right? I don't think that's going to cut it for the young man being Will Levis. Mike Vrabel, of course, the head coach, another guy. I have a ton of respect for Mike Vrabel. Really, the Titans organization as a whole, I mean, they have absolutely whooped our ass in recent years. So I can't say, I don't want to poo-poo the Titans too much, but is Vrabel the type of coach that's going to be able to fix this from an offensive standpoint? Again, former big-time linebacker himself, very nitty-gritty, disciplined. Not really an offensive-minded guy, more of like that, I don't really know the word to describe it, but you get my point, kind of built in the mold of like, we're going to be tough, right? Like the Dan Campbells of the world, right? Even though he was a tight end, not a linebacker, right? Objectively, on the surface, this does not look good for the Titans this season offensively. You talk about nurturing a young quarterback. When Will Levis is at his best, not this season, but next season, the season after that, you're going to have Derrick Henry coming down on that decline. So it doesn't really look great for them as far as nurturing a young quarterback. They're going to have to continue to add to that. So now that's the Titans and the Texans that we both look at and we say, hey, not for anything. Sure, they have this young rookie quarterback, and sure, they're in our division, and sure, we were 4-12-1, but realistically, how scared should we be, right? Now that brings us to the Colts. So now we're going to go back to our guy, Anthony Richardson. Now, a lot of what I'm about to say about Anthony Richardson, I understand to some degree, are kind of recycled points, but I do feel it's important to repeat them after examining the Texans and the Titans. I mean, they become a lot more powerful when you look at them through the lens of the AFC South as a whole, right? So the Colts are a team that not that long ago, just as recently as last season, obviously, I say this all the time, easy now to look at the Matt Ryan year and say, wow, what a disaster. But coming into the season, we were viewed as like on the brink of being a contender, maybe representing the AFC in the Super Bowl or at least being in the AFC Championship. I mean, that was the discussion, and not much has exactly changed here. I mean, we're looking at basically the same squad minus a few pieces, right? You take that into account, and now you put in Shane Steichen, right? We know the guys he has worked with. Again, this episode, we're talking about nurturing young rookie quarterbacks. You have Steichen, who has worked with guys like Phillip Rivers, who I mean, they couldn't run. I don't even have a fun analogy for this. Phillip Rivers is slow, right? He can't run. Phillip Rivers is a pocket passer, throws the ball, cerebral, wins with that brain of his, a great brain that he was nice enough to bring to Indianapolis for 1 year. I think many of us didn't appreciate that season at the time. That's neither here nor there, right? But Steichen has worked with him. Obviously, we saw the way Justin Herbert was able to burst onto the scene. Jalen Hurts, we believe, at least I believe, would have been great with or without Steichen. But you can't just dismiss the role that Shane Steichen played in his development. And this was a guy that was considered another one, maybe not there in terms of his arm from an NFL standpoint. And now you put Steichen here with Anthony Richardson, right? With the Eagles and what they were able to accomplish. An offensive-minded guy, which other than Dougie P in this division, he stands alone as an offensive-minded guy, right? You look at the receivers we have, big-bodied guys. One thing that a young quarterback is going to love, and this is a fun fact for the kids right here, is you're learning football, right? Obviously, as quarterbacks get better, they become more precise, they see the field better. You can throw to a variety of different guys, but you'll notice that young quarterbacks like tight ends and big-bodied receivers. So when you look at the size that Indianapolis has, and why, by the way, do young quarterbacks like that? because those guys are open sometimes when they are not. They can use their body to kind of win a 50-50 ball, and you can just sling it to these dudes. Bigger range, right? As things are moving fast, maybe the accuracy isn't quite what it is in practice when everything's moving a little bit slower. But when you have these big, rangy weapons, that becomes a lot easier to throw to those guys in game, right? So you talk about Pittman, Alec Pierce, Jelani Woods, right? The list goes on of these big-bodied dudes that Anthony Richardson's going to have to be able to throw the ball to. And then you have Jonathan Taylor and this offensive line that really started to come into its own in the second half of the season. Do we have any questions that we'll be able to run the ball this year? Because I don't. And Lord, when you take the 2021 MVP and all of a sudden there's the threat of the quarterback holding on to it and running himself, by the way, maybe even running faster, I would love to see in a race Jonathan Taylor versus Anthony Richardson. Who does it? Who wins that race, right? I mean, you take these things into account, right? And I know I'm going a little bit fast here, but I'm trying to wrap up the episode for y'all. I know you don't got an hour for me, right? So, point being, all of those things I just mentioned. Offensive-minded coach in Shane Steichen, who's worked with a bunch of quarterbacks. And I didn't even mention Jim Bob Cooter, another guy heavily accomplished in this league. Widely respected. His work with a number of great quarterbacks. Did some great work in, Detroit last year? Look what they got out of Jared Goff, right? The receiving core, better than the core that the other rookies in this division are dealing with. And then you take into account that we've established ourselves as a team that can run the football. Obviously, last year being the outlier, I don't expect that to continue. All of those things I mentioned, it looks like Anthony Richardson is not just in the best position to succeed out of these AFC South rookies, might be in obviously the best position to succeed out of these AFC South rookies. And that doesn't even include the character that we're seeing out of him. I mean, again, as I said it earlier in the show, I'm starting to get the feeling that when we look back at this draft, that we're going to look at Anthony Richardson and what he had accomplished and say, wow, why didn't we see that one coming? Why wasn't that obvious? Why were there any questions? But we'll see, right? Obviously, this is all talk about talk, nothing about nothing, until the time comes where we actually get an on-the-field product. So until then, I'm going to be making content to keep us going through the rest of the offseason. And that's what you just watched. You've made it to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for being here. Couldn't appreciate you any more. I mean, people that continue to come back and watch this, ultimately why I continue to make the videos. I mean, making videos like this and just talking. I don't even have a partner to talk to. I do, but he's not a Colts fan. So, we talk about other stuff. But in terms of this channel, to just sit here and just talking to a camera by myself, very, very difficult thing to keep up. And I'm not just trying to pat myself on the back. I'm just being honest, being a little transparent with the people here. So I thank you for coming back. You keep me motivated to do this. At this point, if you haven't shot the video a like or subscribed yet, now is the time to do so. Of course, you can share it with a friend if you like. I say that all the time, but I know it's a big ask. Regardless, that's what I've got for this episode. Until next episode, my name is Justin. This right here was the Riding the Bench Colts cast. Until next time, go Colts.